I'm here to talk about privileged access management in the finance sector and why it's important, etc. As we said before, and as the other presenters have said, if you have any questions, then please leave them to the booth or after the presentation. You can send a chat and we'll follow it up later. So, senhasegura, who are we? We are a technology company, and we have been in this business for 8 years in the PAM business. We've been in the technology business with things like artificial intelligence since for around 20 years. We were asked by one of the world's largest, or the 6th largest bank, to look at some problems that they had, and that led us into the privileged access management arena, solving the issues and the problems that they've had, and working with them to actually help produce the product that we have today. We're a Brazilian company. We're available now in over 30 countries, and what we have done is traditionally privileged access management has been seen as difficult to implement, slow to implement, and a long time to get a return on your investment. We've taken those issues on board and produced a product that we believe is the fastest to deploy and the quickest to give a return to value. If you take a look at our booth, there is a video which will be running on that, which shows that we can get a return to value within sort of 7 minutes. So you can be up and running and getting something for it. We are the only company that cover the complete access management lifecycle. We provide governance before, during, and after access events. And by that, what we're looking at is sort of before you have any problems, we're looking at the identity side of the business. And that's things like certificate management, cloud identity, local user identity. Many organizations at the moment are pretty siloed in some of the areas that they have their privileged accounts or they have their privileged information. We typically see people obviously with on-prem, in cloud, hybrid, etc. PAM has to cover and does cover all of those areas into one consolidated platform. So what we look to do there is things like look for these privileged accounts. We can do a discovery exercise where you can look for these privileged accounts and then start taking some actions on them, because you'll find you'll have more accounts than you anticipated when you do the discovery exercise. The during period, obviously, we look at everything to do with access. So that's privileged access management, both in cloud, on-prem, using it as a service. So we have senhasegura as a service, or PAM as a service. We look at accesses and privileges on endpoints with a subject called PEDM, which is the elevated privileges that some end users get or some end devices get. We are also capable of looking at DevOps, and DevOps is going to be one of the main areas that is coming on, excuse me, coming on stream very, very quickly. If you stand still now, you're going to find yourself basically having legacy networks everywhere. DevOps and securing privileged accounts is something that when you're looking at a privileged access management solution, you need to make sure that they're covering these things, because the acceleration for DevOps in the next 12 to 24 months is going to probably be as quick as the last 5 years has been for the rest of the industry. The idea of being able to get things quickly and to a service very quickly means that there's going to be lots of secrets and lots of privileged information that needs to be protected. And we also cover things like SSH keys. After everything, it's all about evidencing what you've done. And this is basically the compliance side of privileged access management. So it's everything you need about reporting. You need to know who did what and when. So that's what we're all about as far as offering a privileged access management solution. So what does Gartner say about us? Well, we are a challenger in the Gartner Magic Quadrant. The reason that we're a challenger and not a leader at the moment is basically down to our geographical spread. We have addressed that by looking at EMEA and looking at you guys, and we're starting to make inroads into the European market. We now have representation, as I said before, in more than 30 countries. So that's addressing that. On the partner insights, this is where clients basically report on us. And as you can see, 97% of our clients would use us again. Our support and service, which is critical to you guys and critical to our partners. It's a 24/7 support operation. We integrate our ticketing system into any existing ticketing system. So we have the ability to do that for lower level technical support issues. But once again, we come top there. Deployment, we have complete deployment capability. We can remotely deploy. We have engineers waiting to help you out if you get into any issues. And evaluating and working with us. We actually don't just basically dump the product on you. We actually try and get to understand what it is you're looking to get out of this particular PAM solution and work with you in order to achieve those goals. So overall, from a peer insights perspective, we came out top against our competition. When we look at the other areas that Gartner addresses, there's a thing called the critical capabilities report. We come about third in that against all PAM users and PAM suppliers, and that would depend. In different areas we come top, in different areas we come second or third, but it goes into far more detail, and you'll find that equally from the previous report to the existing report, some vendors have been dropped because they don't keep up with the technology. So that's a bit about who you're dealing with when you're dealing with senhasegura and what we're trying to address. But for you guys, what is the problem? The problem that you guys have is, as mentioned by Leo from RedSwift, is that financial institutes have a great reward for being attacked if you get through. And as you said before, it only takes one successful attack to give you potentially massive rewards. And finance institutes are 5 times more likely to be targeted. You're a highly regulated industry that needs to adhere to several compliance regulations. Not complying, as you guys know, means fines. Being able to show what you've done and evidence what you've done will help reduce those fines, particularly for things like GDPR. The recent high-level attacks that have been shown have had people like British Airways, who were initially threatened with £100 million, I think it was, it might have been $100 million fine, got that reduced to $20 million because they could evidence what they had done. And the same will happen to any industry that needs to adhere to these compliance regulations, and you guys seem to have more than most. So you've got to be able to comply to not just GDPR, but things that are specific to your industry, like Sarbanes-Oxley and the SWIFT regulations, as we've just heard. Third-party access is prevalent and needs controlling, very much again to do with the compliance side, being able to report on who has accessed your data, what they did, if anything was done, and being able to prevent that from happening. You guys have a lot of third parties, you have e-commerce sites, you have third-party business partners that you deal with on a daily basis, and you have remote locations as well. So just a few figures, which I know we've seen a few of these so far, but 81% of breaches involve stolen or weak credentials. And once again, that was highlighted with what Leo presented at RedSwift, in that it doesn't take a lot to get information that helps people start small and work their way through your organization. 91% of attacks target credentials, and the reason for that is that the credentials are the keys to the kingdom. Once they've got a credential, a bad actor can sit for months waiting to launch his attack, do their reconnaissance, as we've seen, and wait for large transactions and see what trends are within the organization. 73% of passwords are duplicated. Many people use simple passwords, or if they think they've complicated it, there'll be things like being asked to put a capital letter in. 9 times out of 10, they'll use the first letter of their password as a capital. When they're asked for a special character, they tend to use the exclamation mark. When they ask for a numeral in their password, it tends to be the number 1. This is just human nature and tends to help bad actors breach your network. When we've done discovery exercises, we find that there are anywhere between 2 to 5 times the number of privileged accounts than those that you are known about. And part of the reason for that is that people don't change their passwords very often, or if their password policy might be every 3 months or something like that. Privileged accounts is not just administrative accounts. There are privileged accounts everywhere, and this is one of the areas that I think people need to realize when they look at what it is they do. And when we do these discovery exercises, we find privileged accounts everywhere. And these can be things such as service accounts running apps, automation help desk, where people try to use the help desk to apply patches to third parties, things like that. Non-human that allow network resources to work. These have privileged accounts. People who don't have administrative rights but have access to privileged data. So you'll have people in your organizations that obviously have access to sensitive data because they'll have access to financial records, but these guys do not have the ability to change passwords on firewalls or switches or network devices, but they still have privileged account access because of what they are having access to. So that's an idea of the areas of where privileged accounts lie. They are everywhere and getting bigger, as I say, and particularly with things like DevSecOps coming into play. There's a lot more secrets and privileged secrets being created. Typical breach, which is using credential stuffing, which is partly phishing, partly doing social engineering, then this is what we have found, is that credential stuffing is basically an attack on institutes where a stolen account is used to gain access. And as we've seen from the autopsy, if you like, that Leo took apart the last attack that was quite famous, which was the Florentine banker attack. This is quite a non-technology driven thing. It's easy to get this information. So credential stuffing is used. It's an old attack, but it's used very, very commonly everywhere. And what is this process? We have seen that it starts with harvesting, collecting the leaked credentials associated with the target organization. And that can be done via phishing, via doing social networking, by buying this information off the dark web. So there's plenty of places where this information resides. The second phase is accessing the account. And what these guys would do is they'll test their credentials against a target to see if there's any further information they need to get, whether it's things like authenticating requirements that might be needed in order for them to create the attack. And then they'll do some further investigations until they can use automated tools to see how far they can get through your organization. The third thing, obviously, is the data exfiltration. They collect this information and they can use it immediately to get a relatively smaller reward, or they can use it for other illegal actions. They can sell this information on the dark web. They can sit there with this information and start to plan their attacks. And finally, what they do is they put this stuff back out into the wild and create a bigger list to start with. So, some examples. Between January and August, unidentified actors used aggregation software via having access through some credentials to basically walk away with $3.5 million in fraudulent check withdrawals. Last year, there was a group of criminals who targeted financial institutions, walked off or compromised more than 4,000 accounts which were used for bill payment services, and took about $40,000. And as we just saw earlier today, the Florentine banker attack in June walked off with £1.1 million worth of transactions that were set up. And as we know, approximately half of that was recovered by stopping the direct debits, etc., etc. But at the end of the day, if you walk out with £600,000 to £700,000, which is close to €1 million, that's not a bad day return for about 3 to 4 months' work. So, how do we at senhasegura protect these credentials? senhasegura is a full life cycle PAM solution, as we've said before, covering before, during, and after an attack, through access control and monitoring solution to prevent attack before it propagates the network. And we do this by taking each of those examples and saying, harvesting is, as we saw earlier, or as I said earlier, is to collect the credentials. What does senhasegura do about that? Well, we manage these privileged credentials in an encrypted database. So we encrypt the credentials automatically. The senhasegura would do this automatically using 256 AES encryption, preventing the credential being harvested and used in the clear. So it makes effectively the credential useless to anybody who's harvested it. The second action from a bad actor's perspective is to gain account access, and they can test the idea is they test these credentials against a target application. What do? Well, senhasegura can automatically and periodically change the password of the credential managed by it, and this is something that is set by the user. Once again, it's stored in the central encrypted database. So using senhasegura, the password can be changed based on a selected time cycle that you use. The complexity of the password is driven by your security policy, and obviously each organization is generally different. And finally, the next thing that these guys try to do is to extract the data. Well, from us, we prevent or help prevent the data exfiltration via session management, and I'll be showing that in the demo. You guys can disable the session, stop it from being transferring data or copying data, or simply close the session down. So, from a demonstration, what I'm going to try and cover is third-party access control, looking at the reporting side of things on access history and traceability, and then look at some certificate management. As I say, the certificate management is part of what we offer as the before side of things, so you can see what certificates you've got, etc., giving us a complete overview. Okay, sorry, I'm now just looking to, there we go. Let's reduce that. Okay, I'm assuming that you guys can see this threat radar. Yeah, cool. Okay, so to start this demonstration, the first thing I want to do is to set up a session. So I'm going to simply set the session up and show you how we control this. What we've got here is a list of credentials that have been most commonly used on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, we have sort of the last access that people had to this. And then here is what's under my custody as Mark Heather up here. So if I start a session, all I'm going to do is fire one up. First thing to notice, if we get there. Great. Okay. First thing to note is that we record the session, and you're being told here that that you're on the demo and that the session is going to be recorded. What I've done is, obviously, as you can see, is I've opened up the session to AWS. So going back here, what I want to do is, okay, go to my radar and show you what we actually do now to control this session. So I'm going to go back to the radar that we saw earlier. And if we look at this, you can see my session here. You can see that I've got a session running, so we can look at this. And it tells you all that you need to know. It's me on the session, where I've landed, what credential was used, and that's important, what time the session started, the duration, etc. We can look at a graphic of what's happening here. So you get all the information now in a graphical fashion. All of this is reportable, so you can see the IP address I came from, when I went through the senhasegura, and the console that we've landed up on, credential that was used, what protocol and what port. If I live stream this, so you can guys, if you guys were monitoring someone, if something here was happening that you weren't happy with, you can actually see by live streaming what it is that I've been looking at and what it is that I've been doing. And once again, it's telling you that the session is being recorded. So you can see if there's anybody who's been working out of hours and you've had an alert, because on the behavioral side, we can set triggers and events to let you know of anybody who's been using or trying to gain access in unusual times or for unusual activity. So this is basically letting you know that Mark Heather is looking at this AWS site. And if you decide that that is not what you want Mark Heather to be doing, you can drop the session. So you simply say, yes, I want to drop the session. You get notification that the request and the session has been terminated. You'll see here in a minute that hopefully my little dot will disappear to show that the session has dropped. And there it goes. And if I look at the console, it tells me that I've been disconnected. So that's how we are controlling third-party access. If you had lots of people trying to do this, you can gather all your third-party access guys or split them up into multiple VPNs and manage them as a single entity through the proxy. If we look at the history now, just to show that what happened, I need to go to dashboard. Go to Pam. Where am I going? Remote session, click on PCR. Lost my session here, sorry. I want to look at reporting on what happened here. So I want to go to my reporting. If I go down to PCI and I look at remote sessions, because we've just looked at a remote session. What we're looking at here is basically the reporting functionality of what happened with that remote session. So here we have me as the user, credential used, the console, session ID. This session ID can be used, can be used to create an encrypted backup of the video that you've seen. So we can then search at a later date to hunt for this video and see what happened. It's also available after you've purged the system. So if you purge the videos, and these videos are only small snippets, so there's not a lot of bandwidth, a lot of space taken up here. And this obviously shows that we came from the proxy, what protocol used, etc., etc. So that's the history of what happened to that particular device, and you can check all of that through. If we now want to look at the traceability of this, just want to see what I want to show you what happens when reports when somebody accesses some devices. Let's see what happens when they do this. So if I choose a device, let's see what we can choose here. Traceability device, yeah. So I'm going to start playing around with this device here. I'm going to edit this device. Okay, what I'm going to do with this device, rather than change anything which is likely things like the connectivity or anything like that, because it shows you what's coming through, etc., etc. I'm just going to change its name so you can get an idea of what's reported. We'll call it AWS ROMSIN. We know that it's live, and I want to save that. Okay, so the device name was changed successfully. It gives me all that information. And what I'm going to do now is show you where we wind up looking at here. If I go to this, I don't think that's, refresh that. Just wanted to. That's what we've done. You can see we've changed the name there, and just to show where that actually comes out. What you get a report on is basically what the action was that happened. It was a device change, who changed it, what the entity name now is, and what it was before. So you get a history. So if anybody changed any of the port identities or changed anything to do with that device, you get a full audit trail. And this is, as I mentioned before, when it comes to things like compliance, and particularly with GDPR is about evidencing what you've done. They don't care about what it was that was compromised so much as to what you did about it and how you can prove you did what you did about it. So from a third-party access control and reporting perspective, that was it for the quick demo on that. But the other areas that we are involved in is things like certificate management. So if we look at the dashboard for certificates here, what we can see is within the organization how many certificates are deployed, how many are active. There's 1 inactive and 13 unsecured, so they don't have passwords attached to them. What we can do on the certificate management side as well, because once again it's to do with the access side, is we can set up alerts to different people in the organization to say this certificate is going to expire in X number of days, and on different days you can send different things to different people. You can set up the origin of certificate. You can ask for an audit of the certificates. You can basically do anything and everything you want to do with regards to certificate management. That's, you know, the whole dashboard area is very comprehensive. So from a reporting and dashboarding perspective, everything you need to know about who did what, when, where, and how is available for reporting, capability for reporting access, etc., etc. So I'm hoping now that you've got my PowerPoint back up. Okay, cool. So just to sort of summarize really what senhasegura provides, we provide a full PAM solution. We manage passwords, meaning that passwords are rotated or changed automatically. We manage access. We have an automatic discovery and capability. So as I say, when looking for certificates, when looking for devices, when looking for credentials, you can automatically discover this through the system. Then what you can do is draw up your audit and asset register list, see which credentials are no longer used. You can look at, for example, credentials that haven't been used for the last 6 months. You can then start to delete those from your system, and thereby you're reducing the attack surface. We automatically audit privileged use, meaning that we look for unusual behavior. We can look and allow access or deny access based on keystroke activity, etc., etc. We have the capability to automatically audit things in Active Directory, go through your users there. We have two-factor authentication, etc., etc. We do full reporting and dashboarding. So senhasegura's differentials is we are a one deployment option, basically. With the full turnkey capability, we have we give you, within the PAM solution, you get load balancing, you get a database, you get a web server. None of those require additional licenses, which when you compare with competitive products, you need to check the full solution that's being offered and whether there's any additional hidden costs there. We're fastest to deploy. We reckon that it takes about a day to install to get some meaningful and some decent information back. One of the biggest things that people complain about when looking at PAM solutions is its ease to adopt. And by that, it's how easy it is to learn the product and how continuity of setting things up is important. And we're very simple to do that. We reckon it takes a user less than 90 minutes to get au fait with how to set things up with senhasegura. And we're future-proof or future-ready in that some of the options we offer are modular, so everything will be additional modules. As I say, although initially the PAM solution for PAM capability is all in the one instance. We have full certificate management, we have PAM endpoint, and we're moving him now into DevSecOps areas, and we have our secrets management module, which is being deployed as we speak. Key takeaways from today: PAM is crucial for cybersecurity and becoming more and more important. It's getting a bit more blurred really as to what a PAM account is. As we say, it's not the traditional now just thinking about password security and access to devices and the IT guy who sets things up. PAM accounts are everywhere, particularly when looking at compliance and protecting access to privileged data, which in the financial world, as you appreciate, there's an awful lot of that. You need to have a clear implementation and strategy. You need to communicate it throughout the organization. Implementing PAM affects everybody. At the end of the day, people need to understand that PAM is already in your network. You can't set up an identity and access management solution without having a PAM credential. So, you need to understand how many credentials you have and then start to reduce the attack surface that's being exposed. As an organization, we've been in business for the PAM market for 8 years and 20 years in IT. Says here we're coming to Ireland, and the reason for that is we had a presentation yesterday in Ireland. But we're coming to the rest of Europe as well. So with that, as we say, a call to action is visit our website. Come and speak to me on the booth if you want to talk about anything in particular to do with PAM, how we have implemented it in the past. Just a quick overview while I'm finishing this off for you guys to have a look. As a financial institution, we have reference sites. This was one that, as we say, says there that the bank is under NDA. It is. If you saw the earlier slides, you'll work out who it is. But we did an awful lot with this organization. We reduced their downtime. We have 100% management of their certificates. They achieved compliance. And they are load balancing across multiple sites. With that, guys, I think I'm finished.